Thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here. And what I'd like to do over the course of the time that we're together is to frame up a conversation. And from time to time, I'm going to have you engaged in the conversation. And maybe we'll ask them to shop or stop or the like along the way. But I'd like to have a conversation about learning and about what is happening in learning, what's changing in learning, what's not changing in learning, and take a little bit of a look at what its implications are for that. I've made up a few PowerPoints because that sort of happens when you do a presentation. But there are probably two good things you'll know about the PowerPoints. One is that they're not very core to what I'm going to be talking about. Okay, they're there, and I'm going to use a lot of pictures, and you'll see none with 3 bullets on a page. Okay. Now, I'm not knocking anyone who does them, and I've been known to do them as well. But I've had some interesting interest in the cognitive memory of PowerPoint exposure. Meaning, when you see PowerPoints, what do you memorize about them along the way? And what's interesting is we're starting to see a lot of research that says very little. Okay? Now, I had an interesting phenomena with PowerPoint. Probably about 6-7 years ago, I was honored to be asked to be a keynote speaker for Wall Street Journal at a big conference called D. It's a digital conference. And there were some very, very big names there. And so because I was a speaker, I got to have dinner with them. And sitting around the table were Bill Gates and his wife, Melinda. And next to him was Steve Jobs. And over here on the other side was Steve Case, who had left AOL. And Walt Mossberg from the Wall Street Journal, and myself. And we just had this interesting conversation. I had known Bill Gates several times during his career and done some things with Microsoft. We got onto learning, and I was very honored. They said, you know, this is Elliott Masie. He sort of helped coin the term, or at least popularize the term, e-learning. And he's been very involved in that field for a while. And Melinda Gates, Bill's wife, eyes light up, and she turns to me and she says, Elliott, you're the learning guy. What's the very best tool for learning? Now, every now and then you're in a moment where you have to make a do I talk truth to power situation. A little bit of background about Melinda. Before she started to date and then married Bill, she was working at Microsoft as a product manager, and she's the person that brought you the annoying paper clip in Microsoft Office, which, by the way, has some good things behind it, but it's got a little bit of a sandpaper effect on it. So I'm not, and I know what she wants me to say. She wants me to say PowerPoint. Okay, and I'm trying to figure out, do I get the word out of my mouth? Like, you know, and she says again, she said, so what do you think is the best tool for facilitating learning? And it's not coming out, you know. And so I take a deep breath and I realize, and by the way, she was eating macaroni salad at the time. And I said, Google. And one piece of noodle went like this and went flying. And so Bill got to her defense and said, but Elliott, why? What's wrong with PowerPoint? I said, you know, Bill, I know you've gone through a whole antitrust thing with the federal government, but personally I think that PowerPoint ought to be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. He said, why? So if you're having a sleep problem, put a 30-slide stack on, and you'll probably be asleep halfway through that process. And there's nothing wrong with PowerPoint. I use it, I'm going to use it here. But what I don't think we've always thought through in learning is the relationship between the choices that we make, and do they help or hinder learning? And it'd be a really interesting thing. And we've all done PowerPoints, and we know it's part of our lives. But at some point, go up to somebody randomly and ask them about your third slide, you know, and the like. And almost in that, I mean, I get stopped by people who've heard of me or been in programs I've done or seen TV shows. And I get stopped, you know, in airports and other places. And nobody has ever referenced a slide that I've done. Now, they have referenced stories, and I'll try to tell a few stories along the way. But we're going to take a little bit of a look at that, because it's not that there's anything wrong with PowerPoint. We all use it. And there's not that there's anything wrong with any of the learning, training, and other performance tools that we use. But it's an important moment, I think, to ask our question, is it the best one? Is it how we optimally learn, what's happening with both changing generations and the like. So what you're going to see is most of what I'm going to do is have a couple of different visuals up there. But if we just take a look at this for a moment, what's interesting if you ask the average employee, and by the way, I reordered the slides just to give you a lot of chaos, you know, because like any speaker, I think I sent it to you, what, like 3 weeks ago, and life changes, you know, so I woke up this morning, and then I came down here, so you got them all in order, so that's actually a second delight in that. But if you go to almost anyone in business, in any role, and you ask them about business today, they're going to tell you that there are all these words shooting out at them. All these words. You certainly know from being in the field related to accounting and finance that there's a tremendous amount of emphasis on innovation, on speed, on process, on change, and the like. I certainly know I sit on a couple corporate boards that in the whole area of regulatory compliance, it's an enormously interesting, important, and turbulent time with that. And in the light of that, we're going to have to figure out, how does one learn in this world? How does one learn in this process? Now, it's interesting being down here, but one of my good colleagues is Richard Riley. He was Secretary of Education. And what Richard would say, and I think it's one of the great quotes I heard out of a cabinet secretary in years, he said, when you learn something today, its half-life will usually be less than 4 years. That when we learn something today, the half-life of what we learn will usually be less than 4 years. He said the problem was they don't tell you what the half-life is. So you learn it, but you're not sure, will it be valid for a day, will it be valid for 10 years and the like. And so we are continually now in an intriguing process of learning and relearning, changing and updating and the like. Now, part of what is making that so interesting, and I know later on you're going to have a speaker talking about different generations, but whether we talk about it age-wise or whether we talk about it in terms of their ethnic background, whether we talk about it in terms of their professional background, is that our organizations, and I think it's what's wonderfully, wonderfully unique about the United States, is diversity. Because I travel all around the world, was recently in Hong Kong, China, India, down in South and Central America, and in almost every one of those countries you see a fairly homogeneous workplace. You go into the United States, you go into a room like this, and you immediately see increased diversity. And you see it in a variety of ways. And one of the interesting challenges and opportunities for us in diversity is to think about how we all learn differently. Okay? So let's even look up there. Okay? And let's look at one of the older people there. And I want to share with you, I'm 62. Okay? I love being 62. I call myself an alpha boomer. Okay? And it's interesting. Are any other like boomers in the room here? Okay, we got a couple folks. Now, what's really interesting is we are exciting and enormously frustrating. Okay, because first of all, to those of you who are just below us, we're not leaving. We're staying. I have a friend who's a boomer announced she'll be here 10 more years. All the people start to print up their resumes. So, you know, they were waiting to get their jobs. Well, but it's happening at levels even beyond that. So one of the members of our learning consortium is a very large fast food chain you might have heard of, and I won't mention them specifically here, but they do make hamburgers. I went to one of their stores to see how employees were being trained. And there was a 76-year-old first day on the job new hire. And she was learning how to make hamburgers. Put them down, there's an amount of time, it'll ring, you flip them over. And she was making them. She was being trained by a 19-year-old crew chief. 76-year-old woman, 19-year-old guy. And he's very pleased with her. He turns to look over here. She reaches into her pocket and takes out her own spice and puts it on the burger. And I watch her doing that, and I get this big smile, you know? And he turns to me, he said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Well, your burgers are fine, but I've always thought there wasn't a little bit of a kick to them. You can't come in here and make your own." "Look, son," she says to him, okay? She's 76, he's 19. She said, "Try it, they're quite good. You know, it'll catch on at the other restaurants." And he tries to take her through standard operating procedures. We don't enhance that. And he actually does taste it and thinks it's fairly good. He said, "Well, we should send it to headquarters," and the like. But we've got this interesting moment that increasingly we're doing learning at both ends. We're doing learning for people who just started their jobs, and we'll talk about them in a moment. But we're also doing learning for people who bring an enormous amount of life experience to that job.